The Global Cruise Activist Network is bringing together leaders and other activists from around the world. We're going to start with a brief introduction of the Global Cruise Activist Network and the principles of responsible cruise tourism before announcing our exciting new initiative. Once we finish, we'll open it up to questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat during the presentation as well. Joining me in presenting today are Jane Mosto in Venice, Italy. Jane is director of We Are Here Venice, a nonprofit that addresses Venice's challenges as a living city and advocates evidence-based approaches to policymaking. Their campaign against large cruise ships began in 2014. Jamie Barnett is president of the International Cruise Victims Association. In 15 years, ICV has grown to include several hundred members in over 30 countries. Their advocacy with the US Congress resulted in passage of the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010. Klaus Ukestein from Bergen, Norway, advocates for cruise ship worker rights, helps staff an aid center for them in Bergen, and hosts a Facebook group, Ending Sweat Ship Exploitation in the Cruise Industry. And Linda Clark is in the Cayman Islands. Linda is a leading member in a campaign to protect Cayman's famous coral reefs from destruction by a proposed cruise dock. The campaign secured signatures of over 25% of registered Cayman voters, which successfully triggered the first people's initiated referendum in any of the United Kingdom's overseas territories. And Linda is also a professional accountant. I'll pass the introductions on to Linda now.
Thank you, Karla. Dr. Steve Gratian is on the Gold Coast, Australia, where it's Thursday, 6 a.m. Dr. Gratian is a founding member of the Save Our Spit Community Action Group, who successfully blocked ship visits and the construction of cruise docks on the Gold Coast for 18 years. Maria Poulos is also up early in Sydney, Australia. Maria is a leader with the Save the Bay Coalition, working to protect Botany Bay from cruise terminal development. Sam Duncombe is president of Re-Earth. Re-Earth is calling upon the Bahamian government to conduct an environmental impact assessment on the restart of the cruise industry, as well as a ban on any further private cruise ports in the Bahamas. Re-Earth is a partner in the Stop Disney Last Chance for Lighthouse Point campaign, which has gathered more than 330,000 supporters. I'll ask Sam to introduce the final three presenters.
Thank you, Linda. Cara Sandys joins us from Southampton, United Kingdom, where she works to educate the media, policymakers, and community leaders on air cruise ship pollution and its health impacts. James Walker is a maritime attorney and well-known cruise law news blogger. Everything the cruise lines don't want you to know is the motto of his award-winning maritime blog. And finally, Marg Gardiner. Her neighborhood in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, is heavily impacted by cruise ship air pollution, over-tourism, and ground transportation. They successfully took steps to plug a gap in the North American Emissions Control Agreement and have pushed a cost-benefit study that incorporates intangible costs of the cruise industry. I would also like to recognize that other GCAN members are online today, including wonderful Jim Ace, who has been taking care of the technical side of things.
2020, in communities where cruise ships would have been disembarking thousands of people a day, life has been different. Stores selling things locals don't need or want are shuttered. Unless you're in Southampton or Genoa, where cruise ships are waiting, the air is cleaner. In Alaska, they had nature instead of helicopters. In Key West, Florida, the ocean is as clear as glass. And here in Venice, we're rediscovering local life without towering ships scaring us and crowds of people in the streets.
2020. People who love cruising are waiting or battling for refunds from canceled cruises, or are wondering if their upcoming cruise will be canceled and when it will be safe to cruise. Others are rethinking under what conditions they'll ever cruise again. Crews are waiting, ship contracts and Some are rethinking ship contracts after weighing risks and returns.
The year 2020, life has changed dramatically, and the Global Cruise Activist Network, also known as GCAN, has been at work. Cruise port residents, civil society organizations, and labor and crime victim advocates have come together to demand no return to business as usual for cruising.
In September, GCAN published our Principles for Responsible Cruise Tourism, which can be found at globalcruiseactivistnetwork.com. The principles address 12 issues, including self-determination of communities, economic impacts, climate change, public health, and cruise victims. These principles describe the future we want to see, and the global pandemic has created the opportunity to see it.
We now have a unique opportunity to set the conditions for cruise ships returning. Our message is this: to resume operations, the cruise ship industry must become socially, environmentally, and economically responsible. This will require a radical transformation in their business model and corporate cultures. GCAN's principles provides a roadmap for that transition. The cruise industry growth of recent decades has come at great expense to the planet, to other segments of the tourism industry, to port communities, and to people on board and off the ships.
Today, GCAN launches our global Rethink Cruise Tourism initiative. The cruise industry's business model has depended on burning huge volumes of highly polluting fuel, dumping in the ocean, underpaying its lowest paid workers, and avoiding labor, tax, environmental, and criminal laws, in addition to contributing to global climate change. These choices demonstrate how cruise companies put profits before people. They have long been petri dishes for disease, including respiratory and gastrointestinal infection. This year leaves no doubt they are simply not safe during a pandemic. The industry once again failed to protect the health and safety of crew and passengers, with tragic consequences.
Then in 2020, COVID hit. Princess Cruises was the first cruise ship to have a major outbreak. The ship was quarantined in Yokohama, Japan on February 4th for 1 month. Over 700 people became infected. 14 people died. At the time, the ship accounted for over 1/2 of the reported COVID cases outside of mainland China. As of early May, over 40 cruise ships had confirmed cases of COVID on board.
Even when COVID-19 was an obvious threat, cruise ship companies knowingly and willfully kept sailing, despite the risks. Cruise lines made a choice to prioritize profits over public health. It was terrifying for our small Cayman community when the first confirmed case of COVID was brought by a passenger off the Costa Luminosa, resulting in our largest hospital closing completely for 2 weeks to quarantine staff. The passenger very sadly later died in Cayman. Costa Luminosa continued to sail.
We all know the result. Cruise ships exacerbated the spread of COVID. Passengers, crew members, and shoreside communities, and most of all, families of the deceased, have all been paying a heavy price.
Just days ago, the US Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, issued a travel advisory recommending that all people globally avoid travel on cruise ships because the risk of COVID-19 on cruise ships is very high. According to the CDC, cruising safely and responsibly during a global pandemic is very challenging because cruise ship travel facilitates and amplifies transmission of COVID-19.
The bottom line is that taking a cruise during a deadly pandemic is inherently dangerous and reckless and causes a burden on already overtaxed first responders, medical workers, and hospitals. most major cruise brands, such as Carnival, Royal Caribbean, NCL, MSC, and Disney, eventually canceled many of their cruises throughout this year into 2021.
Despite these dire international warnings, the industry continues its relentless drive to expand the industry by continuing the development plans for new cruise terminals, including in the Bahamas, the United States, Belize, and the United Kingdom.
And Botany Bay. This moment, this pause is an unprecedented, once in a pandemic opportunity to rethink cruise tourism, before it restarts, to rethink cruise tourism before it leads to more infections, to rethink cruise tourism before people book cruises, to rethink cruise tourism's long history of environmental pollution, and finally, to rethink cruise tourism before investors throw more money at an industry that promises so much but delivers so little. The goal of this initiative is to spark a public policy discussion about the future of the cruise industry and encourage loyal cruise customers, investors, governments, and policymakers to rethink before starting cruise travel.
I'd like to invite Sam Duncombe from Bahamas to say a few words about rethink before restart.
Before cruises restart, we're calling on travelers, cruise companies, and governments to rethink the cruise industry to drive the creation of socially, economically, and environmentally responsible cruise sector. We expect the cruise ship industry to use this pause in operation to review their business practices in terms of social, environmental, as well as economic performance. This will require radical transformation of their business model and corporate cultures.
Thank you, Sam. Dr. Steve Gratian of the Gold Coast, Australia, will introduce Rethink Before Reinfect.
It's not safe to resume cruising during a global pandemic or during any future infectious outbreaks. A government review on the ban on cruise ship operations in Australian waters is due on the 17th of December. But already the cruise industry is lobbying the Australian government to recommence cruise activities as early as possible in 2021. And this is despite Carnival ship, the Ruby Princess, being confirmed as the original source of all the infections and deaths across Australia from the COVID-19 virus. This forced Australian state borders to be closed, caused the destruction of the domestic tourism industry, and sabotaged the Australian economy for 8 months, which also placed overwhelming pressure on our public hospital systems. At the moment, there is a class action by 800 Australians in the Australian courts regarding the Ruby Princess infections and deaths, and a criminal negligence investigation regarding the same issues. The cruise industry's current PR spin about the strict measures and rigorous testing that they are supposedly going to introduce to make cruising safe again rings false, especially when the Ruby Princess tragedy could have been avoided if the cruise industry had enacted proper biosecurity protocols and put community health above their insatiable addiction to profits at all costs. So we ask cruise fans to rethink before you rebook and to rethink before you reinfect. The life you save could be your own, the life of someone you love, or the life of someone in your community.
Thank you, Steve. I will now call on Jamie Barnett of International Cruise Victims to speak about Rethink Before Rebook.
Thank you. If you should find yourself requesting a refund, you might not get it. Any credit for future cruises could expire before you actually get to use it. You may not get the cruise you paid for. The cruise industry desperately needs cash, and it's willing to mislead customers to get it. Some cruise lines are selling cruises to ports closed due to COVID, where they cannot visit.
Sorry. Thank you. I'd like to invite Cara Sandys of Southampton to say a few words about Rethink Before Repollute.
Most cruise companies burn the dirtiest, cheapest fuel available, heavy fuel oil, and have an established record of breaking environmental laws. Burning fossil fuels like HFO and LNG contributes to climate change and directly risks the health of passengers, crew, and port communities like here in Southampton by exposing them and us here to air pollution that increases risks of respiratory illness and complications from COVID-19.
Thank you. Linda Clark from the Cayman Islands will introduce us to Rethink Before Reinvest.
Cruise companies are a high-risk investment. With most cruise operations suspended, revenue from ticket sales hasn't been recognized for months. To remain solvent, they have been forced to take on enormous debt to keep their idle ships afloat while they repay expiring debt and refund customer deposits. The world's 3 largest cruise companies, Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Group, and Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings, are collectively burning through over 1 billion in cash per month. Additionally, the 3 biggest operators, Carnival, Norwegian, and Royal Caribbean, all face shareholder lawsuits claiming that the companies made false and misleading statements or failed to disclose and conceal damaging facts known to them about their risks while operating during a pandemic. Investors claim the companies deceived the investing public regarding each company's prospects and business, artificially inflated the price of common stock, and caused investors to purchase common stock at inflated prices.
Thank you, Linda. And finally, Jane Mosto from Venice, Italy, will say a few words about Rethink Cruise Tourism.
Tonight or tomorrow, the Italian government will be announcing the next stage of measures to control the spread of the pandemic. Included in this is the possibility that cruises will be suspended over Christmas. It's not just a question of restricting the risks of the pandemic, which is a huge issue in itself. We're also in a climate crisis. Nobody can deny that. And there aren't economic arguments or jobs that are exempt from considerations of the environment and social justice. Karla?
Karla.
Sorry, mute, yes. Okay, thank you, Jane, very much. And to everyone who spoke. The graphics and a couple of short videos for the campaign are posted at globalcruiseactivistnetwork.com, and you're welcome to use and share them, please. Klaus, do you explain the logo? And you're muted, Klaus. Klaus, you're muted. Sorry, the world of Zoom in the pandemic.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, fine. Briefly, I'll explain the GCAN logo, which consists of 2 international maritime signal flags above the GCAN name. Maritime signal flags have specific and standard meanings. The top flag in the logo represents K and means I wish to communicate with you, while the bottom flag is L and means you should stop your vessel instantly. Our message to Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, MSC, and the other cruise ship companies couldn't be more clear than this. K for Kilo, I wish to communicate with you. L for Lima, you should stop your vessel immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. Now we'd like to invite journalists to ask any questions they have. You can put them in chat or use the raise your hand function. We've got several screens, so if someone's monitoring and can shout if there's someone who needs or raising their hand, please. No questions or shy people? Oh, Martha Honey, please.
Hi, thank you all very much. This is really impressive and great that you're doing all of this work. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about the next steps, how you're going to get out the word about what you're doing. Are there specific campaigns that are underway? What do you see going forward, and how can the rest of us help?
Sure, Linda, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question, Martha. Yes, well, we're launching some videos today that hopefully can be spread around on social media. Sorry, my dog's just started barking. And we are hoping that the cruise lines will dialogue with us at some point. We all have our own individual communities that have their own issues, but we would like to have some dialogue on a broader level with several jurisdictions and the cruise lines and try to improve the regulations. Jane, did you want to say something?
Only if you finished.
I was just, okay, so we're hoping that we can improve the international regulations around cruising, because maritime regulations are weak for many vessels, shipping, fishing, cruising, and really we want to see a better international regulation around this for all of the issues that we have raised in the principles of cruise tourism.
Jane.
I just wanted to add that we're all come together now because we all in our own ways, in this specificity of the places where we are, have been campaigning, some for very long time, some for shorter amounts of time. And the initiatives that come out are much more powerful now that we're connected and we can share contacts and share knowledge. And the thing is not just, we don't think of this as just something to campaign. We've also written to the cruise company executives, and we hope that they'll understand that it's necessary to enter into a dialogue.
Thank you, Jane. I see Nancy Klingener, I apologize if I mispronounced, oh, wait. One up, sorry. I'm not the best moderator here. Yuri Kemp is asking Sam Duncombe, do you expect to roll this project out in the Bahamas? And do you plan to derail the upcoming port construction at the Prince George Wharf in Nassau, Bahamas? And Yuri's with the Tribune newspaper. Thank you.
Hi, Yuri. Okay, in terms of rolling out the campaign, we will be posting it on, across all social media, and hoping to engage more people in terms of what the campaign actually means, looking at the principles and reasons why people should rethink cruising. When you consider that our tourism dollars from cruising amounts for 10% of what we get, and the damage they cause, that's a big issue. In terms of, I just want to say quickly that our petition to stop Disney is at 393,000 right now, and growing. And in terms of the port, I think that, as a country that has relied on cruise ship tourism for many, many years, I think it's more about reining them in and getting them to do what we need them to do and what we want them to do. So this is the beginning of many press conferences. More dialogue is definitely needed with those companies, with the government, so that they can actually understand the impact that these ships have on our health, on our environment, on our social fabric. So we will be continuing, yes.
Thank you, Sam. From Nancy with WLRN News. She asks if we see the successful city charter amendments in Key West as a model that could work elsewhere. And I can say from Juneau, Alaska, absolutely. Many of us around the country certainly are looking at this and watching to see how things roll out and the timing for our local initiative. So yes. And from Sarah Reynolds with the Republican Journal in Belfast, Maine, your website says some of your number want to shut down the cruise industry. Why should cruise lines talk to you if you want to put them out of business? Is there someone in our crew that wants to take that on directly, or shall I?
I wouldn't mind talking to that point regarding the Gold Coast, Australia.
Thank you.
We have successfully defeated proposals for the building of cruise docks and terminals on the Gold Coast. There is a merchant and international cruise port 75 kilometres north of us in an established merchant shipping area that has safe docking. And the Gold Coast, if there was to be docks built on the Gold Coast, it would destroy whale migratory paths, turtle nesting sites, $1 billion recreational surf tourism industry, a 500 million a year inshore dive industry, and it would annex public parks and the last coastal dune system on the Gold Coast. So all of those are huge economic and tourism drivers and quality of life choices for people on the Gold Coast. So we're not banning the cruise industry from operating in Australia. We're asking them to respond and operate responsibly, safely, and take into account the existing tourism activities that are huge economic drivers and work with the ecology and environments on the Gold Coast rather than destroying or negating them. So our position is that there should be appropriate places that do not destroy existing ecologies and ecosystems and do not destroy existing tourism drivers. And that's why on the Gold Coast we'll be ferocious about fighting any first constructions of cruise terminals. So it's not putting the cruise industry out of business, it's making them responsible for the choices they make.
May I, Karla?
Yes, thank you, briefly.
Okay, Marg Gardiner from Canada, Victoria. It's very important, we've always taken the position that the cruise industry should become good corporate citizens in our town. They have not. And I think this is very key. There are ways that things can be mitigated. The cruise industry keeps doubling and doubling and doubling without actually communicating with us. We are tired of the spin. We do not need in-between people that want to speak down to us. We want to deal directly with the industry so they can actually become not just accountable, but so that they can actually become a benefit to our community instead of being on top of us. That is very important. It is very sad what has happened here and what is happening with this industry and with our community because of this industry. So we need them to pony up, to come forward and to sit down with us and not to send their spin doctors.
Thank you, Marg. I see Joseph Varon has a question. We'll take that and then I'll jump back to the questions online. Thank you.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good evening or good morning, wherever you all are. I'm in Long Island, New York. I'm not a reporter. I am a retired New York City teacher and an environmentalist. A past, don't shoot me, cruise taker. But I think one of the biggest problems is many people are really ignorant about how damaging these big mega traveling cities are to our environment and to your communities. I mean, a lot of us, it's getting cold here in the winter, you know, would love to go down to a nice warm area and take a cruise, and I don't realize the damage that these things do. And I think many more people, I've been on a few of your you know, of these Zooms with you, and I think many more people are coming to realize that before more ports can be built and bigger boats can be built, there has to be an environmental impact statements all over. And I'm just wondering, as an individual, a person who does write lots of letters, you know, if we around the world can write letters to our newspapers, to politicians, to the cruise line, saying that we are members of the organization and want you to meet with the leadership of the organization. If you could put sample letters maybe in your Facebook things that we could replicate and then send to our local politicians, to send maybe to people at the UN, to send to the president of Disney. I think a lot of people are willing to help and realize that, you know, that these boats have a very bad impact to the air and to the environment. And
thank you, Joseph. I'm gonna move on, but this is a wonderful example of, we've got a lot of members of our network who come and have participated in some of our events. We've got enough that I apologize, Joseph, I didn't recognize you. We have locals all over the world who are connecting with us and transmitting the information, and we will have some sample materials available absolutely for our members to use. So I'm going to go to Sloan Smith is asking how, I see that you have a global network to bring awareness to this issue. How do you plan to give key focus to individual countries, especially those that rely on cruise industry, such as island nations? And Sloan is with the Eyewitness News Bahamas. And I'll just respond quickly that we have, everyone here is connected to a local community, or like Jamie, a local issue, a specific issue. And so we are all connecting locally, and we are all from the communities. So we are not going to, as a group, all turn our forces and all decide that we're going to do something about Bahamas or any other destination. We're trying to raise the power and awareness of all of us so that we have a voice locally and globally. And Sam, that was specifically to Bahamas. So do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, in terms of getting the message out, I think, again, we have to look at the economics of what the cruise industry brings to the country. 75% of our visitors are cruise visitors, but they only represent 10% of the tourism dollar. So we need to be getting more money. We need to stop them from polluting. The whole industry has to reform, and we're basically giving them what they need to do on a platter and telling them this is what needs to happen so we can all work and live together.
Thank you, Sam. I'm going to go now again to asking, and if folks online could help me to see if there's any reporters who have questions that want to ask questions. With multiple screens, I can't find you all.
There's a question, Karla?
Yeah.
There's a question from Lily from Skift that asks what's different about our campaign or more impactful than past efforts to speak to consumers about the negative impacts of cruise tourism, and are consumers our primary focus for the time being, or do we plan to address cruises directly or at some point? Should I just answer and then somebody else can add? Hello, Lily. And well, our campaign is different because we're a global alliance. You know, I don't know if you've noticed how many different people we are around the world. And it's important, speaking from a Venice point of view, because Venice has enormous issues with the cruise industry, and we became even more engaged because we know that it's not a question of just shifting the giant cruise ships from Venice to Trieste or even just outside the lagoon. There are fundamental issues with how cruising operates, and not all cruising, there's cruising and cruising, but a certain type of cruising is way beyond the carrying capacity of anywhere on earth. And that's why it's different, because we're allied around the world, and cruise companies won't be able to just move somewhere else because it's getting uncomfortable in one region. They're going to see the same issues opposing their wrong practices wherever they try to go. And yes, today, the whole point of today is to launch a new way of campaigning for all of us. And we're going to carry on working hard to make sure that there's more people like the gentleman that spoke a few moments ago, who maybe would have considered going on cruises and were unaware of all the negative impacts that kind of holiday can cause. There are so many different ways of taking a holiday, spending more or less money. That's not the point. It's what you do. It's how you do it, not what you do.
Thank you. Can I just jump in and also ask to amplify your message and the fact that you're actually a global network? Are you looking at any form of political partnerships or bringing on policymakers or finding support within your respective destinations to amplify this?
Well, everybody has to do everything they can within the local reality of where they're based. So at some point, one does have to deal with local or national politics, and that's where it's more difficult for us to share experience, because each place is different. In Key West, they managed to hold this incredible referendum with very, very meaningful results that you probably heard about, to restrict the number of cruise ships, the number of cruise passengers, and give priority to the cruise ships with least environmental impact. So everybody will have to do what they can to be most effective wherever they are.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I see a message from my hometown newspaper from Peter Siegel saying that Juneau and other small communities here in Southeast Alaska don't have a lot of economic activity outside of tourism except for the resource industry. How do you plan to frame your argument in small communities very dependent on cruise industry revenue? And to that, I respond that the cruise industry has grown not because more people are traveling, but because they have consumed the market share of people who would have traveled otherwise. So specifically in Southeast Alaska, people who would have once been coming on the Alaska State Ferry and visiting our small communities or flying in are now seeing Alaska as synonymous with cruise, which it is not. And so by having a much smaller cruise industry that's locally controlled, locally owned, and keeps the revenues in a community longer, whether you're Bahamas, the Cayman, Venice, or anywhere, you can have a less impactful cruise or less impactful tourism industry while still maintaining a viable tourism industry. 50 to 60% of the cost of every shore excursion the cruise industry sells goes into the cruise industry's pockets, not into the local communities, as just one example. Did anybody else have something they want to add? Or we're getting close to the time, and I understand if people need to drop off, we'll stay on as long as there are questions, but do understand if you need to drop off. Nobody else that I see just jump in unmuted. So Stacy, so there's a conversation going on about the Salish Sea online, and that's a fairly specific geographic. So if there's anything that needs a broader response, chime in, please.
This isn't
Karla, there's a message here about the CDC from Norma Connolly.
Oh,
Are you disappointed that the CDC went from a no sail order for cruise ships in September to a conditional sail order, despite its advice to travelers not to travel on cruise ships? And secondly, I know it's quite a broad question since you're all from all over the world, but are you getting much support for your proposals from your respective governments. That's from Cayman Compass.
Thanks, Sam. Does somebody want to take that on? Jamie?
I will. Yeah, I can say not only for those of us involved with GCAN, but for the people involved in international cruise victims who did submit comments. Both organizations submitted comments to the CDC and did a lot of work and had high hopes that the CDC would extend that no sail order. And we were devastated when they were overruled by the administration. In fact, we are trying and hoping that they'll reconsider it. Not to get too political, but a new administration in the United States may change things. We have some legislative support both in the House and in the Senate right now. And so hopefully we'll be able to build on that and science will win out. So that's what I bet Jim Walker has a lot to say about it.
Jim Walker, would you like to chime in? And you're muted. Still muted, Jim Walker.
Here we go.
Thank
So
you.
I think what Jamie was referring to was the success of the international cruise victims with legislative efforts leading to the Cruise Vessel Safety and Security Act. So we're going to continue on those steps. My view of the CDC's conditional no sail order is it's the best that they could do with their hands tied. And again, not to be too political, I don't think that that issue is over. And the cruise lines have basically admitted that they realize they're incapable of sailing safely during a pandemic due to the fact that they keep on advertising and selling cruises and marketing cruises as being safe. But in reality, they're all kicking the can down the road, I believe, in the hopes that a vaccine will come along and that they can find a way to market the cruises with a vaccine. I think that they realize that it's unsafe and reckless to sail during a deadly pandemic, quite frankly. I think that we'll probably see a change with the CDC with the new administrations, are my thought.
Thank you very much. Jane, are there quite more questions from journalists? If there are, if you could drop something in the chat so I can see to call on you. And if not, I might turn it over to Jane to wrap it up and let you know that we have members all over the country or the world. So if you have specific questions or want to reach out to anyone, please let us know through Global Cruise Activist Network at gmail.com, and that's on our website as well. So I'll let Jane wrap it up, please.
Well, thank you everybody for attending, and we're all here to continuously answer questions and discuss anything with absolutely anybody. It's not a question of like us wanting to close down the industry. If the industry has to close down, it'll be their own fault for not adapting and not acknowledging the world in which they need to operate. Thank you everybody for being here, and both to my colleagues in the network and to everybody else who's joined right now. Ciao.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. I just got a little nudge to mention that on Friday at the same time, noon Pacific time, we will be hearing from Martha Honey, who's on the call today. She's an economist and we'll be talking about economic impacts of cruise tourism. And so if any of the members of the media would like to join us for that, please reach out to me by email and we can make sure to include you. And the recording will be available after. We just need a little time to get it processed and posted on our website. So thank you all for participating. The Meeting is officially over. If anybody wants to stay and ask anything more, you're welcome to do so. We'll keep it open for a few minutes. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Bye, Sam. Bye,
Thank you.
Sam, and bye.
Bye, Joe.
Goodbye, everybody. Be well, keep safe.
Bye.
You too.
Don Lindsay, I see your hand up in BC. Oh, it's a clap. Thank you, Don. Now you see
Thanks,
these.
Dawn.
I have to go. It's late now. I need to put somebody to sleep. Good
Thank
night.
you, Jane, so much. Thanks. Ciao.
See you Friday.
Jim O'Connell,
Well done, everyone.
I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was hoping to get a word in edgewise, but I guess it wasn't the time and place. So I'll see you Friday.
Okay, great. We need to do something just on marine mammals one of these days, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Are we talked out, everyone?
Are there any journalists left?
I see Cairo 7 News and Nancy and Yuri. Yes. They're waiting to hear our secret discussion afterwards. Okay.
How are things going in Sydney, Maria? Have you heard any more news about Botany Bay?
Oh no, but we do know they do want to dust off the business case, and of course we know that the managing director of the International Cruise Line Association has had lots of talks with the government, and they really think they're going to resume cruising early in 2021 in this sort of phased